Hey, what's up everyone? It's Jordan. Welcome to a piano lesson on left-hand improv patterns. We've done one of these before, so if you are really into this kind of thing, you can check out a previous lesson. I think this is just something that a lot of people struggle with. A lot of people are looking for just ways to get their left hand to become this instinctive rhythm and harmony-making machine without having to, worry so much about coordinating it with the right hand. So we're going to look into some patterns that I use to get myself into the mentality of just kind of flowing with the left hand so the right hand can do its thing. If you have any questions, just hit the Ask a Question button under the video. I'll answer them on stream. And yeah, so this morning I was just practicing along in the key of E minor. It's a pretty simple key for all you beginner players out there. It's also a really rewarding key for people of any skill level. It's only got the one black key. It's just got the F sharp. So before we even start off with these left-hand patterns, let's just warm up. Let's warm up with some minor scales. So I'm at 80 BPM on my metronome. And we're just going to go up and down 1 octave. We're going to do that 3 times, and then we're going to go up and down 2 octaves 3 times. We're going to do this with both hands. If you are comfortable doing it with both hands, follow along. If not, don't worry about it. Just do one hand and do the other hand separate. Okay? So 1, 2, here we go. Oh, sorry, I just autopiloted 2 octaves. 1 octave. 1, 2, here we go. And back down. And back up. Back down. And back up. Back down. And now we're going to do 2 octaves. And we're keeping on going up. Back down. And back up. Keep it on going. Back down. And we're going to do this one more time. And just for fun, we're going to play up and down staccato like this. And work on our dynamic ability. See if this inspires some ideas for you to improvise with. Beautiful. So it's always important to start off with scales. Scales are that's how I tend to think about improvisation. I tend to think either in the gear of scales or in the gear of chords. And frankly, I think a really good set of ingredients for improv is to think of chords in the left hand and scales in the right. So we are going to do a bit of we're going to ramp up the challenge here just a little bit. We're going to make our left hand into this really simple pattern. All we're doing is we're playing a broken arpeggio chord. So it sounds like this. Okay, so it's just going to continually ascend. So pinky, ring finger, pointer finger, thumb. Pinky, ring finger, pointer finger, thumb. And that is going to be our driving engine in the left hand. And the right hand is going to play, it's going to walk up that scale. It's going to walk up and down. and we're just going to keep it in one octave so we can keep it nice and simple. But again, this stuff that I'm teaching you, everything that I'm teaching you is just sort of tip of the iceberg. Music is all about finding your own voice in it, so use these kind of ideas as the launch point for your own stuff. So we're going to try this at 80. We're going to see how we all feel about it. Okay, so the left hand is just doing this. And if you need some time before you even bring in the right hand to just feel this out and kind of get into the motion, feel free to do so. Because the left hand, for the purposes of this lesson, you want to be able to trust. It's an instinctive thing. Okay, so now we're going to play the same beat, so we're doing quarter notes in the right hand. And back down. And back up. Notice how I'm holding my last bottom E in the right hand with a whole note, just to reset the pattern, make sure that I'm all synced up. And again, because music's all about expression, try staccato. Whenever I play staccato, I'm always reminded that the piano is a percussion instrument. You can try eighth notes. You can try eighth notes in both hands. You can go back to legato. There's all sorts of stuff that you can do to build your hand independence and build your dynamic instincts. When I'm practicing and when I'm practicing with the kind of open-minded mindset where I'm receptive to some ideas that might come, where I'm all of a sudden, I'm starting off just practicing scales, but then all of a sudden it's like, oh wait, what if I go in this direction? And then this direction, then all of a sudden you're starting to write a song. So when I'm thinking about practicing for the purposes of kind of building some inspiration, I'm thinking about what are my tools available to me to express at the keyboard. I can play each note in different ways, so I can play it really quietly. I can play it really loudly. I can play it smoothly like this, letting each note kind of ring out, or I can play it staccato. I can play different tones together. There's all sorts of parameters that you can use in your toolkit to make music. Okay, so having said all of that, probably the best way to make to develop ideas when you're practicing is to combine a few chords or scales. That's when you're all of a sudden working on chord progressions and melodies and stuff like that. So we did all these exercises just in that key of E minor, which if you just leave it in the key of E minor, things just tend to sound exercisey because you're not changing any color. So now we are going to make a little bit of a change in gear here. So going back to this pattern that we had in the left hand with our pinky, ring finger, pointer finger, thumb, just playing that E minor arpeggio. We're we're going to shift down a note to sound like this. So now we're playing a G major chord. We're playing D, G, B, D. Again, it's a 4-note ascending broken chord. So now we can experiment with those sounds. And if you want to keep it nice and simple, you don't even have to play scales. You can work on your rhythm. Notice how in my right hand, I'm just playing G. With the same rhythmic speed as my left hand. And listen to how it changes when I go from my E minor arpeggio in the bass to that G. I'm going to do it now. Okay. And let's try making just a C major chord in the left hand. So now I'm going to move down just one position. I'm going to play C, E, G, and C. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is one of the cool things about music that you can just kind of discover on your own if you just explore it. How much the bass notes, what's happening in the bass clef at the bottom part of the keyboard, however you want to think about it, affects your notes played in the right hand. Now let's make a D major arpeggio in the left hand. So we're going to move up just one note. We're going to play D, F sharp, A, and D. And we're going to keep holding this G. It's going to make a really interesting combo of sounds. 1, 2, 3, to D. And we're going to go back to that E minor. And if this G is starting to get a little bit, you know, we're kind of wearing it out, let's go to B. And you can even just experiment with walking down, 3, 2, 1. Just walk up and down like this. And let's try going down to that G chord. Now let's walk down to the C. Now let's walk up to that D. And then if we remember that we're just working within the key of E minor, the only note that we have to bear in mind is kind of, the only weird note in the family here is that F sharp note. And then we can just sort of experiment. Once we start to feel like our left hand is just ticking along here, it's almost like it's sleepwalking. The left hand just becomes, or yeah, left hand's all good. And the right hand, you can just experiment with scales, chords. Here I am just experimenting with different chord inversions of my E minor chord. Now I'm playing different versions of my G major chord. Now I'll switch to my C major chord. 2, 3, 4. And remember, we can still play staccato. Excuse me. So, yeah, that's, again, just some kind of cool mentalities. Let's explore playing a little bit faster and just staying in. This is one of my favorite progressions that I use to improvise with. So I'm playing an E minor 7. And I'm going to switch to play an A major chord. All I'm going to do is change my top 3 notes. Notice how, if I break this down, my pinky note's playing E, and these top 3 notes, this is just a G major triad. This is a pretty simple chord. And I'm going to switch to play an A major triad, but I'm still going to keep on pedaling my E in the bass. So it's going to make a progression that sounds like this. And then you can go back down. Okay, so we're going to work with that. Let's see. Okay, I'm going to go down to 70 BPM just to make sure that we're all tickety-boo here. Oh, before I dive into this one, I'm going to get to a few of these questions here. Okay, we got a question from Vincent. Hey, Vincent, how you doing? Vincent says, I was just wondering, I know there are guitars for left-handed people. I don't think there are any pianos made for left-handed. Do you have any left-handed piano players? And if so, do you think they learn with the same difficulty level as a right-handed person, or is it easier or harder for one or the other? And Vincent, you're right-handed. Well, I can actually tell you I'm left-handed, Vincent. And that's a really good question. I've thought this myself a lot of the time. I suppose I don't know. I think maybe having a little bit more just natural dexterity in the left hand, just because I write and I do all my just kind of daily life stuff with the left hand, maybe that's given me a bit of an asset. But the thing about the piano, like you're absolutely right, there is no left-handed piano. But there are plenty of left-handed piano players. The thing that you have to recognize is the piano doesn't just rely on your hands and your finger. A lot of it actually relies on your arm. So, am I left-armed? Maybe. I don't know. But a lot of the instincts that you develop for the piano are kind of specific piano instincts. So I don't think there's a whole lot of advantage between one type of person or another. But it does bring to mind one interesting little anecdote. If you want to check out an interesting track, there's a song called Black Market by a band called Weather Report. They're a 70s jazz fusion band. And the keyboard player is named Joe Zawinul. He's really, really cool. And he actually used a European power converter on one of his synthesizers to reverse the polarity of his synthesizer. So it changed how, it basically swapped his keyboard around. So the high notes were the low notes, and the low notes were the high notes. And if you actually notice, the piano isn't strictly symmetrical, so that changed how the key, that changed which key was a different note. So I suppose if you wanted to experiment with a European power converter, you could do that and see what happens. You never know what you'll discover. But yeah, I think left hand, right hand, it's all the same at the piano. Let's see here. We got a question from Gaurav Sankyan. Sorry if I mispronounced that. Just because I'm right-handed, my right hand moves smoothly on piano as compared to my left hand. The left hand is stiff. Okay, yeah. So the right hand and the left hand, they are a totally, that's one of the biggest challenges at the piano. And one of the most unique things about the piano is because the left hand, like, the keys down here in the bass clef where the left hand's playing, exactly the same kind of layout as the right hand. So technically speaking, it's kind of it's a goal for all of us piano players to be able to play everything. Everything that the right hand can play, we want the left hand to be able to play too. That's like that's the pinnacle thing that we can all aspire to. Frankly, I think that's a very difficult thing to, it's a very difficult thing to get to, because music isn't written with the melodies in the bass clef, not very often. So that's a very difficult skill to acquire, because it's very difficult to apply in a musical context. But that's why at the beginning of this lesson we did those scales, because doing scales, your left hand is doing exactly the same thing as your right hand. You're kind of like, you're holding it to the same standard, and you're working with the same rhythm, and you're ideally getting to this place where you're not thinking, when you're thinking as you're playing, you're not really thinking, what is my left hand doing, what am my right hand doing? You want to get to this place where it's just like, what am I doing? I'm working, I'm kind of this, you're sort of jointly aware of both sides of your playing. That's where you want to be. But when I had a big revelation in my own playing, was when I learned to stop thinking about the left hand quite so much as I'm practicing. Maybe you've experienced this when you're working on a piece of music or something, and if you think about it, all of a sudden you make a mistake, or you know, you sort of crash. But if you just trust that you've done your homework, if you trust that you've done all your exercises and trust that your hands just know what to do, then you tend to just kind of flow through it without much of a hitch. So try to remember that as you are practicing with both hands there. We got a question from Double Bounce Beat. Hey, how you doing, Double Bounce Beat? He says, hello, Jordan, can you explain what it means? It's not so much in the fingers, but the arms. Yeah, okay, so just going back to this kind of mentality here. If you're at your piano, try to really just tune into where the feeling is coming from. There's actually a lot of it kind of coming from your forearm, and a lot of times when I'm rhythmically locked in to a piece of music, or with a drummer, with the metronome, I'm actually, the thing that's guiding my rhythmic consistency isn't my fingers. I'm not like just stationary and just kind of, you know, like jabbing my fingers into the piano. It's a motion in the arms. And that is what, you know, that's what kind of allows you to really kind of just get into the music, at least for me. And I think the rhythm, syncing up your rhythm in both hands is one of the big challenges with playing together. So try to think of your whole body as you're playing, and you know, let yourself kind of, you know, direct your power. This is getting a little conceptual, but direct your power from kind of your arm down. That's sort of where the root of it is. We got a question from Gamer Chris. Oh, hey man, how you doing? He says, how can I learn a new song the best way? Right. To learn a new song the best way, sort of depends on what your natural, what comes naturally to you. For me, if I want to learn a song the best way, I listen to it. I'm an ear-based musician, so I listen to it and I pick out, primarily, first of all, I pick out what is the core note of a song. So, like if you take a look at Hey Jude, Hey Jude is in the key of F. I don't have a recording of it right now, but here's the piano part. So if I'm hearing the recording of Hey Jude, and I'm at the piano, I might just be like fumbling around for the first little bit, trying to find where the root note is. And usually, if you're tuned in, you'll be able to hear it when you get it. So if I'm just playing this, just pretend that my right hand is the recording, and I'm trying to find, okay, where's the note that works with this first chord? Obviously, you know, pretend you can't see it on the screen here. But I use my ears to find that root note. Once I find that root note, typically, if it's a pop song, there's going to be the one chord, which in the case of Hey Jude is F. There's also at some point in the song, there's going to be a 5 chord. In the case of Hey Jude, it's the 2nd chord of the song. So, and when I say 5 chord, I just mean the chord that's built off the 5th note in the scale. So F, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's C. So we have our 1 chord, and then we move down to our 5 chord, right? So if you're an ear-based musician, that would be a really good approach. Think about what your root note is, and then just sort of listen and recognize that there's common chords that are going to be found in pop songs. They're going to be the 1 chord, the 5 chord, and then the 4 chord as well, which is, and that's just like, that's the basis of all like modern music. That's the blues. That's the 4 chord. Here's the 1 chord. And then the 5 chord. And then once you get those chords, you can start thinking about what your melodies are. And typically, if you're working with melodies, they are usually going to be, they're written in 1 key. So if you know, for instance, Hey Jude, it's written in the key of F major. That's only got 1 black key. So you can trial and error it. And just kind of, you know, pick and choose until you start finding the notes that line up with the recording. But check out some of our videos on our little song tutorial videos that we have, because that's the way I learn and teach a few songs. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I got a question from Kiran Kumar Masur. He says, hey, what's your suggestion to a guy who is weak in moving his left hand and wants to learn piano? Okay, so if you have a weak left hand, you just find it just hard to play just notes consistently, first of all, practice with a metronome. Practice really, really slow. Don't go any faster than 60 BPM. Maybe even go slower than that. And you can literally just, I'll demonstrate what I would do. Because if you're still just working on finger strength, I would just do this. So I'm just in the key of C, so I'm working with just the white keys. And I would just walk up and down. And because you want to really be building strength, play these notes as hard as you can. But also remember that you're wanting to be playing them all at a consistent volume. And that means paying attention to your pinky and your ring finger, because those are usually your weak ones. I know they're my weak ones. And then you can start, once you start feeling like you are, like you're able to play at the same level of volume, you can start, you know, again, just like at the beginning of this lesson, you can start working on your dynamic stuff. So you can play staccato stuff. You can play, one thing that's really good is to start off really quiet and gradually, it's actually harder than it looks to build volume and then get quieter. So that's something that I would do if you're just finding that it's just physically difficult to play the play the piano. Okay. Alrighty. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. If you got any more, guys, just send them on in. But we're going to take a look at one last exercise. One last little thing that I do, and that is I play with this. Right, no, wait, hold on. I didn't get to this one. So I wanted to do this, this exercise where I'm going from that E minor arpeggio. And then I was going to this A arpeggio. And what makes this interesting to improvise with is because we have a, we've got this C sharp note to make our A major chord. It brightens the sound, right? So going from this minor 1 sound to a major 4 sound, you can kind of hear how it just, it's like if you think of clouds right now, they're kind of like, you know, it's a rainy day, but all of a sudden, a little bit of sunlight comes out. And that's because of this note right here. Because if I didn't have that note, listen to it. It's still raining. Right? So it's amazing how much one tiny little note shift will kind of change the whole sound of things. So we're going to use that as a basis for this final improv. Unless I see some questions come in, I'm just going to improv out here. But if you got any questions, let me know and I'll just answer them after my little jam. But yeah, thank you for joining on in. I'm going to be playing back at, going to set myself back at 80 BPM. And if you want to sort of follow along, just all I'm doing is doing this ascending pattern. So E, G, B, and E, and E, A, C sharp, E. And before I do that, just got a couple more questions here. We got a question from Pratyush Garg. He says, can you please show how to harmonize a melody with the left-hand pattern and how to coordinate between both hands? Sure, actually this, how to harmonize. So this is when I think of harmony in its simplest form, I'll use my framework that I'm going to jam out here on. When I think of harmony in its simplest form, I think of thirds. I think of third intervals. So I think of either minor thirds, which is, in my case with this E minor chord, I got a G, or pardon me, I got an E, a G, and a B. And in my left hand movement, I switch up to this A, and then I have, if I just think of what this A chord is, it's an A, a C sharp, and an E. So that C sharp is the main note, the main harmony note that gives that chord its character. So those two movements. So as I'm playing this little improv, I'm going to consider my home base, if I'm thinking of improving with some harmony, I'm going to consider my home base in my left hand to be, it's this E note, and my home base in my right hand is going to be the G note, so it's going to be the third. And then when I switch to my A, my home base is going to move to be the C sharp. Okay, so that's something to listen out for. We got a question from Michael Gordon. What's the best method of learning how chords go together? Circle of fifths and fourths? Are there any other good methods? Yeah, there are. Sorry, my necklace is all chafing away here. There are a couple good methods. So the circle of fourths and fifths is great, primarily because that helps you learn that sort of helps you learn the important relationship between the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, which, as I just mentioned, is like essential for pop music. So I'll just demonstrate exactly what I'm talking about here. So if you go back to the key of C, if you go up a fifth, that's G, which is your 5 chord. Or if you go down a fifth, that's F, which is your 4 chord. So if you look at the circle of fifths, if you go to the right, if you're kind of seeing it as a clock, if you go to the right, you're always going to find the 5 chord of the chord that you're on. And if you go to the left, you're going to find the 4 chord. That's just the way the clock is set up there. So that's a really good way to find some chords that go together. But sometimes what I do is I'll just make triads out of every chord in the scale. So if I'm just in the key of C here and I have my C major chord, and then I just move this, I just set my hand as a big claw, and just move it up, playing every note here. And in the context of this, well, like what I'm doing right now, it kind of just sounds like a cheesy little exercise. But if you kind of leapfrog around, maybe you just hold octaves in your left hand, or you want to just kind of and I'm not really thinking too much here. I'm just sort of jumping around. Because a lot of times, honestly, I think that any chord can go together. It's just about the context, and that's something that's a lot of fun to just kind of discover. And remember how I was talking about thirds earlier? You can break the rules and experiment with, shifting your third note. So there, if you're staying in the key of C and you want to just go 1 to 4 and just not push the boundaries, you got your C and your F major chords. You can experiment. If I want to change how this 4 chord sounds, the best way to do it is to shift your major third to a minor third. And you can do that with basically any chord in the scale here. So I'm going to go from my major 1 chord to a minor 5 chord. And that changes things. And then regularly if I made a triad if I made a D major or a D minor triad, which would be in the key of C, right? Because only white notes, but so here's D minor. But I can shift it up just 1 semitone in the third. So then I got a progression that sounds like this. Got my 1 chord, then I got my 5 chord, minor 5 chord, and then I got my major 2 chord. And that's a little tune to play with there. just like this medieval thing or something. So stuff like that to keep in mind. Just experiment with what the chords, how the chords naturally sound within the key, and then start shifting the thirds from minor to major and see what sounds good to you. All right, so that's all the questions. I think that's sort of all the time we got. So I am going to do this final jam on that minor 1, major 4 progression in the key of E minor. So thanks for tuning in, everyone.